Okay, everybody, we're about to get started with our final panel of the day. I firstly just want to thank everyone for sticking around. I know it's been a long day of very interesting presentations, and we're about to have a very interesting panel discussing a topic that some of you know very well and some of you may not know too much about yet. So before I get into what that topic is, I'd like to just say that here's our disclaimer and forward-looking statement. I just want to, I'm going to put it right here. Right here.
Yeah, we're blocking Chris.
I don't want to block Chris. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our moderator and the topic of our panel today. And our moderator is Margaret Rosenfeld. She runs the blockchain technology practice at Smith Anderson. And the topic that we want to cover today is one that has received a lot of press, that is known by some. Maybe there's a few questions by others. So our hope and goal today is to try and educate and perhaps walk away with a better understanding about blockchain and cryptocurrency than you otherwise had. So with that, Margaret, the floor is yours.
So many of you attended yesterday's panel on blockchain, which was really Blockchain 101 with a regulatory component to it. And if you did, you got to see our wonderful little role-playing of a blockchain transaction in action versus a traditional transaction in action. If not, please, the videos are up there to watch. Today we're doing Blockchain 102 because many of you yesterday asked, well, what are companies doing out there? Are they all 20-year-old Lamborghini drivers with Bitcoin sweaters? If you saw the New York Times article about that. No, they're not, and you'll see that by the gentleman sitting here and also by the woman sitting here leading the blockchain practice in Research Triangle Park, North Carolina, which is the 8th largest center for software developers in blockchain in the world. So two of the gentlemen to the left are public companies, and we had that question yesterday. Are public companies involved in it? So they're going to talk about that a bit, about what it's like to be a public company and involved in it. And one of them is a subsidiary of a public CEO of a subsidiary of a public company. So immediately to my left, Chris, and if I murder names, they will correct me, Chris Miglino. So Chris is with SRAX, a NASDAQ-traded company. And one of their verticals that they have gotten into recently is an application using blockchain. He's going to tell us a bit about that. In the middle is Joan Cammarata. Slightly murdered that one. And he is the president of tZero. tZero is a subsidiary of the public company Overstock, and you may have heard of tZero. They've been in the news quite a bit. And they are working on an exchange for tokens. And then finally, Todd Ault. Todd is the CEO of DPW Holdings. It's a holding company, and among its holdings are a crypto mining company, which makes sense because they have lots of experience in power supply. And if you know a little bit about mining, which if you don't, he's going to share a little bit, you understand that power supply is very important. And in addition, he's getting involved in kiosks, which is another major part of support for the blockchain technology community. I'm going to ask each of them, so each of these gentlemen has a lot of industry experience in the industries that they're in. So there was one point in time when suddenly someone introduced blockchain technology to you, and something clicked, and you saw an opportunity in there. So Todd, tell me a little bit about when that moment happened.
A writer for Equities.com, Steve Conoval, who I've known for a billion years, who I think was a writer at Nobius, a researcher at Nobius many years ago. Shared with me all these different currencies that were crypto that was available, and I was like, kind of didn't make any sense to me. And then not really understanding the idea that people think that blockchain is transparent, but it really actually isn't it really isn't. They think you're hidden. They think it's like, well, you can hide away from it, right? But really, actually, it's as open as it can be. It's the most transparent way to do business. And what happened was he was just showing me all these different currencies and telling me why he was using all these power supplies we were selling, and that's what had happened for me. It was an understanding that in his world, he's basically saying, it's a power play, get long power. So we actually went out and bought a dam in upstate New York as sort of a precursor to what our thesis was, is that we would control the power connection to the data centers. And it happened basically when he explained to me how it was transparent and it wasn't at the same time, but yet how many things it could be used for. And then my mind went a little crazy. It took me a little while because it was recommended to me a long time ago, and I fought it for a long time.
Yeah, that's a common theme for people who get into it, and a lot of us, and a lot of people probably in the audience, you're learning about it through mainstream media, right? And hearing about it there first, but it takes somebody who's active within it to kind of help bring you along a little bit.
Sure.
So Todd, tell us, when was the first time you kind of had that aha moment?
You mean Joe?
Oh, sorry, Joe.
That's all right.
Sure. So
Actually, no, I wanted to go with Todd. I wanted to go with Todd
Chris?
first, but that's okay. Go ahead, Joe, because you're like, you go ahead.
Sure. So I've been in the fintech space for 27 years. Pretty boring, and I've done the same thing. I've built some trading systems, many firsts, though, the first off-exchange trading system. And in 2014, I was approached by Overstock, who wanted to buy a little piece of my alternative trading system. So it's one of my broker-dealers. I started my business back in 2010. It was 2 broker-dealers, essentially routing for Wall Street. So we're one of the only firms that only deals with other broker-dealers and exchanges. And I would do smart order routing for brokers. To date, we do about 2.5% of all the U.S. exchange volumes on a daily basis. So we're already routing a ton of business. So an Overstock came to us and said, we would like to use the blockchain to monetize, or I'm saying, make it a little more efficient on Wall Street. There's a lot of inefficiencies, naked short selling, issuances, clearance and settlements. And he came to us with that approach, and I thought it was a little bit crazy, but I had also been a miner for a couple of years. In fact, I had built the first level 2 Bitcoin trading system with charts in 2010 into 2011. And back then, most people didn't know what a Bitcoin was, never mind how to trade them. So it sat on a shelf for a while until Ripple came along and offered me 985 million Ripple for it at the time, which wound up being about $100,000. And I turned it down, went back to brokerage, which I'm not sure what Ripple is today. I try not to look.
You don't want to know.
It's at I think it's like 90 cents still.
Yeah.
So in any case, so then we sold this little division to Overstock, and all of a sudden really pissed off a lot of banks and brokerage firms. Big firms like Goldman Sachs immediately hated us. And we realized at that point, we're onto something here. I got a call from DTCC, the CEO, to meet with us. He said, I want to pick your brain. And he's been Overstock's arch nemesis for years. And he started telling me a little bit about their technology. And he said, we just upgraded, this was in 2015, he said, we just upgraded our technology to Pascal. And I said, from the 70s? And he said, don't laugh, it came from COBOL from the 60s. And at that point, we realized, he said, you know, and I hate the name of your company. And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, tZero. And for you, those of you that don't know, Wall Street, up until 2017, settled on what's called T+3, the trade and then a 3-day settlement. And during those 3 days, there's a lot of shenanigans that go on in Wall Street, lending the securities, and Goldman Sachs was committed, we subpoenaed them, 75% of their profits are made in securities lending on the prime brokerage side. So in that 3-day cycle, a lot of money is made, which is why these big banks don't want it more efficient, and they're still using Pascal. So the story was, he said, I hate the name of your company, and he said, let me tell you why. He said, we've been working on a project for 2 years. It has a $500 million budget and is expected to go live in 2017. I said, okay. He said, so 4 years and $500 million. Do you know the name of that project? And I said, I heard about global settlement of some kind. He said, no, T2. So 4 years and $500 million, and they're taking their settlement system down by 1 day. And that's when we knew we were in the right space.
All right, now Todd.
Chris.
Why do I have, Chris,
That's all right.
you know, turn your names towards me. All white men kind of blend together for me.
Me and Todd kind
Gender
of look
humor is
alike.
fun. All right, so Chris, go ahead.
So for me, it was over a long period of time. In 2012, I went to the Ukraine to with an investor of ours that said that he had like some stock guy that he wanted us to meet that was going to invest in our company. And while we were over there, one of my buddies was there, and my buddy was a guy named Brock Pierce, and we were hanging out in the Ukraine together, and we were just partying, and Bitcoin was like nothing, and he's like, oh, this is really, you should buy some Bitcoin, you should really buy some Bitcoin, and I was like, whatever, Brock, because Brock always has like a million different ventures that are going on all the time, and he's a super, super smart guy and like a genius, but everything is always, amazing, but he was like really convinced that this was going to be amazing. So it was kind of my Ripple story. I didn't really listen to him. And then a few years later, I bought a company from Brock that he was selling, and it was called 5 Delta, and it was a social management platform that did a bunch of A/B testing around social stuff. And then, so he became a shareholder in our company when we did that deal. And then all of a sudden, I saw that they were doing all of these ICOs in the latter part of, or the middle part of last year. I mean, they did like the Filecoin deal, they did all of these deals that raised hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars without really even having a business. They were just ideas living out on the blockchain. So we started talking to them about, what is it that everybody's so interested in here? What is it that creates so much value in this proposition? And I think the easiest way to explain it is that it's like, if you can imagine a way that somebody can be disintermediated in a business, blockchain will be a way to make that happen. So if you similar to the story that Todd just told, no, just kidding, that Joe just told, that if they can disintermediate the transfer agents and the clearing firms and everything, then that's a big part of the business. So within our ecosystem, we buy a lot of data. We buy data from Oracle and Axiom and Experian, all the people that sell all of your data all day long. And so we thought, okay, what if we could disintermediate the middlemen that were selling the data and between the consumer and the buyer of the data. And so the blockchain enables that to happen. So all of the data can sit out there on the blockchain, and then a buyer can just come and buy that data, and the consumer can see exactly who's buying all their information. There's nothing hidden. There's a full exposure of exactly what's happening all the time. So it creates a whole transparency to the buyer and the seller about what's happening. And it was in that process of coming up with those ideas that I realized that there's so much opportunity in this space, almost like way bigger than what the internet ever was. And so this next phase of what's happening now is going to be worth way more than what the internet was worth. So the opportunity is at its infancy, and there's going to be a lot of companies that you guys will see that'll start and will be like the Excites of the world, and there'll be others that are going to be the Googles. And there's a ton of stuff that's happening here. There's stuff happening on the shipping side. There's companies that are trying to disintermediate Airbnb and Uber. I mean, this stuff is even disintermediating what you would think are the cutting edge internet companies. So there's so much opportunity here. And if you could think about anything in your business that you can disintermediate, then you should do it. And one of our boards of our directors is a guy by the name of Malcolm Cassell, and he has a token that's called the Wax token. I don't know if everybody knows Wax token, but they ended up raising like a boatload of money in like 30 days. I mean, it was like $50 million in like 30 days when Ethereum was at like $150. So as they were raising money, Ethereum was just kept going up and up and up. So the value of what they raised just kept going up and up and up. And their business is disintermediating their own business. They have a business where they sell skins inside of video games, so kids can buy skins that go on guns and stuff like that inside a video game, but they're disintermediating that process by putting it all on the blockchain and making it available peer-to-peer sales that can happen. So if you can envision something in your business that you can disintermediate, then you should make that happen. That's a huge opportunity.
Great. And I think Chris hits on sort of the thing that we're hoping from presenting these panels at the conference, which is think about this within your business. Every business in 5 years, I would say, is going to have something to do with blockchain related to it. Maybe not even sooner. So find somebody within your business who should be thinking about it. It hits. I haven't found an industry it does not hit yet.
I did. I met a guy on the plane.
Oh yes.
On the
What
way
did you
here. He was in the car wash business.
Tokens.
He owned like 900 car washes or something, and I was like, well, I don't really know like what you could really do. Wait, buy tokens to wash your car?
Well, I can probably come up with
Yeah.
something.
But that was the only one that
Yeah.
looking back.
Well, I'd like to move on to sort of the biggest myths, and we're going to bust some myths. So we're going to start with Joe, because tZero, there were, anywhere from 800 to 200,000 subpoenas that the SEC sent out in January, according to media reports. And I have spent a lot of time on panels saying tZero didn't receive a subpoena. A lot of people think tZero received a subpoena because we're working with the SEC. So talk a little bit about working along with regulators, and that there are companies working with regulators. What's it like?
Let me give him an out for 1 second,
Yeah.
because I know what he's thinking. He's going to think about his response about whether he's talking to regulators or not.
Yes.
But there's
He
some
actually has a public statement.
There's some people here with gray hair, and he talked about T3,
Mm-hmm.
T+3 settlement. When I started, it was T+5. You could get a 5-day extension, and I think you get like another 2-day extension, so it was like T+14.
Wow.
Anyways,
But if it was listed on the pink sheets,
there you go.
you can get a double extension.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, so what are companies actually doing with regulators generally? Because are we just all trying to avoid them or not?
So first thing I'll do is, talk about myths. Let's separate. A lot of people say you guys are in the crypto space, and we're not really in the crypto space. I just want to kind of make a distinction. There's cryptocurrency, which is Bitcoin, Ether, Ripple, and people are trading those. It's more of foreign exchange, right? Then there was ICOs, which are tokens, and it's a utility token, not regulated. And the SEC had a big problem with those. They came out with a report in mid-2017 and said these should really be securities. And then the third aspect where we're really operating is in the regulated, we call it security token offerings. So not ICOs, STOs, security token offerings, where they're regulated and we'll have the infrastructure to trade them. And in terms of the SEC, I've been slapped enough to say we're collaborating.
Yes.
We're in dialogue.
There you go.
And there are a lot of companies and groups in dialogue with the SEC. So not everyone is P.T. Barnum out there, snake oil salesman. They've been in financing forever, right? We've all lived through that. And every financing trend will have them. And those are the ones that are getting hyped up with the media. But there are a lot of companies complying or seeking compliance and compliant ways to do this. So Chris, talk a little bit about your perspective on that. You're a public company and you're getting into this.
So, okay.
Thoughts?
How many people have ever been to a crypto investing event? Oh, so a lot of people. So you see when you go to these events, it's just a bunch of people trying to raise money, and they don't really care about SEC regulations at all. And in fact, they would, I think at the last one that I went to, there was a guy that spoke right before me that was talking about the fact that the SEC was evil and the government should get out of everything, and he wanted to start an island in the middle of the Pacific Ocean where no government was there. And so you have that kind of extreme audience that's kind of this whole alternative culture, but these guys have made billions of dollars, so somebody listens to them. And then I had to get up and talk right after him, and we have this whole talk about the fact that most of the utility tokens that are out there are actually securities, and that we think that ultimately all of those guys are going to get in trouble. The SEC just doesn't have enough time to go around and bust every single utility token that has been funded, so they have to start with the the biggest ones that are out there. And then, and I've said a lot, if you watch some of our old presentations, that the SEC is going to go after the exchanges and cut off the liquidity. And if they go after the exchanges and cut off the liquidity, then companies like tZero have to be there to be able to support the securitized tokens that end up coming about. And all of these utility token companies don't understand, like, if they just followed the regulation, it would make their lives so much easier in the long run, and so it would be such a better situation for all of their investors, because they'd be that much safer in that environment if they just followed the rules that the SEC put out there. I mean, there's so many companies that are raising 20, 30, 40, 50 million dollars that are not filing any financial information. They have no idea what's going on with the money. You don't know what they're doing with anything. And, the tokens are all over the place. There's no rules on these exchanges about pumping and dumping. Insiders can sell all of their shares right off the get-go if they want to. I mean, there's just no rules about how things are being done. You don't know what the guy that put in money before you got. You don't know if he's, in the crypto space, in the utility space, there's a lot of this, they give discounts. And a lot of times people put in money and they'll get a 90% discount, and then some other guy will get a 80% discount. So even though you've raised a certain amount of money, thinks there's only a certain amount of tokens out there, you don't know what they gave to all these syndicates and to all these marketing people that are out there. So I think that the regulation is a really good thing for the marketplace, because it validates the market, it gives it some stability, it gives it some credibility, and it kind of gets rid of the bad stuff that is out there. We do this analogy between the 1929 stock market crash and the crypto craze, and a lot of the things that came to regulate the crash back then, the 33 and 34 acts, are exactly the kind of things that are happening today in the crypto space. So I think it's a great thing that the SEC is getting involved, and if they're watching this, which I'm sure they will, I think it's fantastic.
Well, so I would just say, and Chris touched on the idea of utility tokens within the United States. Yet the concept from a legal standpoint of a utility token has not yet been recognized. So there
Didn't
are.
it get recognized in like Montana or something like that?
Well, Wyoming has
yeah.
a concept of it, but you aren't just raising money in Wyoming.
Yeah.
So Wyoming tries to attract financings and companies to its state. So it tends to go out in alternative earlier than other states.
Would it be worth it to talk about the difference between a utility token and a security token for people in the audience?
So who knows? Raise your hand if you understand slightly the difference or at all. Okay.
So it's worth it.
Yeah. So actually, who feels most comfortable? Joe, I mean, that's sort of your area. I'm sorry, Todd, but
Sure. As I mentioned earlier, again, it has nothing to do with crypto, except ICOs were raising all of their money in crypto. So in other words, you would fund it with Bitcoin or Ether in most cases. But again, I'm trying to think the best way to explain it is, we're building an arcade. Nothing exists except the land, and we're building a video arcade, and I'm going to go out and raise money and give you a discount on arcade tokens when it's built. And that's a utility token. You're going to come into the arcade when it's ready and use those tokens. And there's a lot of rules. I mean, you would know best on the Howey test. There's a whole host of requirements where the SEC, for reasons, they say, well, it's not established, it's not revenue generating, it's not already in existence, you're profiting off of the work of others. There's a whole test that's required. And for that reason, that's where the SEC stepped in and said a lot of these things, they're companies that aren't built yet. And for that reason, they should be securities, and they're in violation of federal securities rules. So ICOs, not to say they're all illegal. Certainly you can do a utility token that's legal. It goes through the Howey test. They're far and few between. In fact, even in our office, we try to avoid the word. We have a swear jar in the office. If you say ICO, you have to put $1 in. But security tokens are really they're securities, and they're regulated as such, whether it's a Reg D or a Reg A. And what we're seeing in the last couple of years, as I'm sure you've all seen, is a lot fewer IPOs. And really a small or medium company's not going to do an IPO. It's not practical. I mean, it's millions of dollars in investment banking fees and
Legal.
exchange fees and
Legal.
legal.
Just kidding.
And it's not real practical. And a lot of them, I mean, big companies have said, we're not doing an IPO. I mean, whereas now you're seeing a lot of entrepreneurs with small companies can do a Reg D or a Reg A or an offering like they could raise 10 million or 50 million. And there's a lot of crypto money that you could fund. So that's the big difference between ICOs and security tokens is these are regulated. And what's very interesting is we're seeing a lot more institutional interest. So we launched our own security token offering in late 2017. We raised $100 million pretty quickly. I'm going to say 45 days or so. And of that first 100 million, about 70% of it was institutions or institutional players. So for the first time, institutional hedge funds, family offices were coming in to invest where they could not invest in an ICO because it was not a security. And the other benefit is you're able to raise money using crypto. So as you've seen the crypto markets explode, Bitcoin, Ripple, Ether, people have so much money, it's created crypto millionaires and billionaires that they don't know how to spend it. So to be able to diversify and invest now in a security token is a great way to spend that money.
Todd, you wanted to add something?
I was just going to say, I have a couple colleagues that have made a couple $100 million in Bitcoin, and they make a practice of almost, at one point they were buying every single ICO. Okay, I'm going to put some in anywhere I could. And so it just kind of reminds me of almost everyone seems to be breaking the law.
Yeah, so I have to protect the blockchain community here because right now the SEC is working on considering 2 safe harbors that have been presented where you can move from a security to a utility token. So Joe mentioned at the beginning when someone's building the platform and they don't yet have a utility token that is integrated with that platform, they don't have their product yet, and you hear about these pre-sales with these discounts. They can be done in a compliant way, the pre-sale, right now, exempt offerings, and companies are doing it. So there are a lot of companies, I think as Chris mentioned, that
Now.
have not.
Well,
but-
now they are.
Yeah.
Last year they weren't.
Well, you know, I will say I was working it last year, so there were companies last year that were doing it properly as well, because it was clearly people who were investing for speculation under the Howey test for on the efforts of others for an investment purpose. But at some point, the concept of transitioning from a security to a utility, to a product, a company is going to release a product. Think about it this way. You buy at a discount 10 Xboxes in June. It's not out yet. You're funding Microsoft's development of that Xbox. Technically, you actually have a security when you do that because you're buying a future right to something that's not yet been developed. And those Xboxes come out in December, and there's a limited supply because they can't manufacture a lot, but you get 10 of them, and you're going to sell them on eBay. Is that Xbox a security? And so the concept of transitioning, that I can fund that. Now, obviously, the SEC is not regulating the people who are buying 10 Xboxes at a discount in June right now, but under the viewpoint of how they view this, that actually would be a security, technically. It's a future contract. For funding the development. But there's lots of different arguments you can make about it. In any case, the concept of a pure utility token that has a function as a utility and using blockchain in that way is really kind of, to me, the very interesting thing that we need to not, tamper down. It has to be regulated. And there are, the Swiss framework that is out there that is trying to do it. So other countries are trying to do it. The SEC is going to get there as well. But let's talk about mining for a second, because that's another myth, that miners are these guys who live in basements and are surrounded by 5,000 computers and closet millionaires, right?
So we have a facility, if anyone remembers Studebaker, the old car in Indiana. We have an old Studebaker plant that we're partnered with that we built. We're building a 25 megawatt facility. We have co-locations in Irvine and Los Angeles, a little more expensive there. But for us, it's just a power arbitrage. I mean, the whole concept of how efficient our power supplies can be relative to the difficulty of mining, relative to the speed and the nanometer of the wafers and how much heat you're producing.
Todd, can you explain what mining is in like 3 sentences?
There's two ways. You verify transactions, you get rewarded for doing it, and so effectively it's a if you're running an S9, it's a server developed by Bitmain. There's other competitors out there, but they're somewhat, you don't use them. But effectively, you're running a server with a simple boards and simple chips that are solving math equations and getting rewarded for it, and hopefully verifying transactions as fast as they can. For Bitcoin, it's somewhat actually of an antiquated process. It's behind relative to other coins that you can mine and that are much more efficient. But it really is a server farm. You're running power and you're verifying transactions. It's that simple. And you get rewarded for it. And the difficulty level increases over time. If you look, there's 21 million Bitcoin, and that, there's about 5 or 6 million of them that are lost forever. They don't exist. By the way, I can see how that happens. We mine about 600,000 a month of Bitcoin, and it's a very scary experience that, it's not easy where to put it. So one of the things we do pretty much nonstop is, if anyone follows our company, we have our chief technology officer was nicknamed Crypto Joe, and it's kind of taken on this cartoon character. Well, Crypto Joe has the keys, but then they're stored somewhere else in offline storage, and it's a scary proposition. That part's not been worked out yet for everybody in terms of getting hacked and losing coin. But it's becoming pretty institutionalized. I don't know that an individual could probably compete with us. We've invested about $8 or $9 million so far just this year since January, and we're building around 10,000 miners for 2018, expanding to 20,000 after that. And we're also developing miners with better chipsets. It's still the Wild West, and it's going to get harder to mine Bitcoin. You're going to have to be more efficient, go down to 7 nanometers if they can get there. So it's becoming a lot more institutionalized. It's a question of what it costs for power, and I don't know if everyone's familiar with what happened in Quebec, but we were really being solicited to be in Quebec pretty hard, and I kind of fought the idea of going to Quebec. I really wanted to keep it in the United States, and then Quebec slaps a 10-cent kilowatt surcharge effectively. So that's something we're pretty nervous about. We're kind of approaching this J.D. Rockefeller concept where we're going to control the whole chain. So eventually we hope to have our own power, our own power generation, our own miners, control the whole path. But we're not there yet. We're working on it.
How much of your stuff is mining Bitcoin versus other coins?
So we mine Bitcoin and Litecoin. We were mining the top 10 cryptocurrencies. We scrapped that, and we mine only Bitcoin and Litecoin, and then we shapeshift to Ethereum. So we have Ethereum miners, but that's the Wild West too. And those are a lot more unstable, and we really want stability. And all of our data centers, we have hands on them, and we monitor all of them 24/7. We know every single chipboard that's mining. And so for efficiencies, we mine Script, we mine 256. So it's about 80% Bitcoin, about 20% Litecoin, and we shapeshift into Ethereum. And if you don't know what shapeshift is, it's a concept of being able to switch your currency in a Jax wallet.
If you don't know what a Jax wallet is.
What?
No, I'm just kidding.
I could
Yeah.
continue.
Yeah, we can go on. So as you get into blockchain, you'll realize that it's an industry, so you have to learn the industry terms. You have to get to understand all of it, and it takes some time, and that can be kind of overwhelming at first because there is a learning curve. But once you get up to it, Jax wallets and ship
Well,
to
there's a lot of people in here that are securities traders.
Yes.
It's really an arbitrage for us. If you look at two L3s relative to an A9 or an S9, what kind of power you're drawing, and we run L3s. We are always arbitraging against them, and then occasionally we'll shift off a 256. We'll switch over to Bitcoin Cash if there's an ARB, but it's a currency markets. I mean, I don't know how else to say it. We're mining currency. That's what we're doing.
Well, let's talk a little bit. So there's certain words that you all threw out. decentralized, disruptive, pseudonymous, transparent. Let's go with decentralized, and I'll go to Joe on this one because you were picking on Goldman Sachs, which is okay. But talk a little bit about how blockchain, and I think Chris explained it pretty well, but like, from your perspective, what is the decentralized part that companies should be looking at for the opportunity?
So, again, part of what we've done, being in compliance with the regulators and working with them, we had to explain, when we first, and I'll take a step back, Overstock, who owns 80% of tZero, did the first ever public company issuance on the blockchain in 2016. So we went to the regulators, they filed an S3, which is a registration statement, and explained to the SEC that we want to do a public offering of a preferred share that's issued, traded, cleared, and settled on the blockchain away from traditional Wall Street, or away from DTCC, which is the centralized clearing agency. And we thought they would love it, and the first question was, what's the blockchain? So we had to go on a 9-month education of explaining what we're doing. And really the way we got through it was explaining, we're not really changing much. We're still doing all the compliance and all the pre-trade. And the way it works is when you do a trade, you do a buy and a sell. You're on one side with one broker, the other side's on the side with another broker, and then their trades go to a clearing firm, and the clearing firm submits them to DTCC. So DTCC is centralized clearing. That's what basically swaps all the cash and securities at the end of the day, and that's that's centralized clearing. What we're doing is all the same stuff, except instead of going to the DTCC, we go to the blockchain, and the blockchain is decentralized clearing, but it's transparent and immediate. So that's why we're tZero. So it happens in near real time instead of the 3-day settlement. It's decentralized and it's transparent, so everybody can see what's going on. As they say, sunlight is the best disinfectant. We're able to really vet out a lot of the inefficiencies on traditional Wall Street and the DTCC markets. So that's primarily what we're doing, is going from centralized clearing to decentralized clearing and transparency.
Okay,
By the way, there's no one more that's going to be disruptive than DTC.
That's true.
They are a complete farce. Joe's firm, what Joe's doing should eliminate them. They're a complete waste of time. They charge broker-dealers a ridiculous amount of money for clearing trades. They should be eliminated. That's the biggest opportunity to disrupt the financial industry, is to get rid of DTC. What he's doing in the space, to me, I think they're dead men walking. And by the way, most transfer agents are dead men walking too.
Well, Chris, talk about decentralization, because what you're doing with consumers owning their own data, obviously what's going on with Facebook right now is just a prime example of centralization, right? So how does yours do this decentralization?
Yeah, so we've been talking about the ownership of consumer data for a long time now, and we started writing the software, around a year ago. And then all of a sudden we had like a 2-day commercial on every single news channel. And I was like, this is the best thing ever. So, I mean, when we started talking about being involved in blockchain, we were really talking about the decentralization of consumer data. So the blockchain was the thing that was giving us the ability to do that, and allowing the consumer to have a view on exactly what was going on with that data and how people were accessing that data. And somehow that gets thrown into a cryptocurrency story, but it's really the ownership of data. Although, we are issuing cryptocurrency, or attempting to issue a cryptocurrency in that process, it's something that is very disruptive to the data business. The data business is, if you're Oracle and you're making billions of dollars a year at a 90% margin selling aggregated data, you're basically like the DTC, I mean, there is going to come a day when consumers will own all of that data, and they will share they're going to be willing to, like, remember the first time that you logged on to QuickBooks and it asked you to connect your Wells Fargo or your Bank of America account, and you were like, wow, I'm never going to do that. Like, I'm never going to connect, my Intuit account to my, Wells Fargo account. Why would I ever do that? And now you're like, okay, I want to connect this all together. It makes your life easier. It's going to be the same thing with consumer data. right now it's people have this thing. They're like, oh, am I really want to share that information, or do I want to share that data? But then it's going to, get to a point where everybody's like, oh, I'm willing to share my credit card data. I'm willing to share my emails. I'm willing to share all this information because I'm worth more money if I share all of that data with marketers, and I'll get paid more money for that. And the ability to decentralize that across the blockchain gives you the ability to accomplish that. But one thing that you said on the transfer agent side, I think there's big opportunity for transfer agents too, though, because I think that the transfer agents could play a role in the crypto space in a conversion to securities that are trading the traditional way. It's going to be a long time before that goes away. So I think that if transfer agents become accustomed to wallets and the transferring of certain cryptos to, certain securitized tokens to regular securities, there's a big opportunity there.
Yeah, acting as a custodian is going to
Yeah.
be the way transfer agents should look at it. We're going to go to Q&A in a second, but before we do, just quickly, Todd, on decentralization, talk about what you're going to do to disrupt and decentralize Western Union, because I thought that was really interesting in your presentation.
So we mine crypto. We've never sold any crypto yet. We have shape-shifted to a few places, but we're basically, we've never sold Bitcoin. We have a test, actually Billy, the CEO of Digital Power Lending, is right over there. We are installing these kiosks that effectively are app-driven. There's 2 TV screens. Apparently Chris did this in the 90s, but
Not with crypto.
yeah, no, with crypto. And so you can walk up to the machine, you can buy 3 forms of crypto, you can sell 3 forms of crypto. The machine can print you out a credit card, you can go to an ATM, get out your cash. You can go to the Star Network and get out your cash. But you can also, let's say you're one of the unbanked, and you go to Western Union and you want to, I want to make sure I say this politically correct, I apologize, but let's say you're Hispanic. The Hispanic population is unbanked in Mexico. There's a big transfer of wealth from the U.S. down to Mexico, and it costs a lot of money. Disruption there is that we can allow you in the kiosk, if you're in Los Angeles and you want to pay your mom's bill in Mexico City, you can log on, you can press a button, and you can send the money for free and pay your utility bill for your mom. And we get paid a charge from the utility to collect the money. And you get to transfer money for free, and you avoid Western Union.
And how much does Western Union charge?
It's astronomical rates. If you go try to send $300, you may pay $30, $40. It's and they may be coming down in price, because at one point it was $70 to send $300. Absurd rates, right? And so the disruption here is the ability to flow money across borders. Now there's institutions in the way of it with KYC. Believe me, they make the rules to make it impossible for you to transfer money. Everyone's a terrorist. They could be laundering $200. I mean, it's absurd. We're dealing with
And ironically, it's easier with blockchain to track terrorist activities.
right. And the irony of it is, this is what I was trying to say earlier, it's actually easier to track where all the money's going with blockchain than without. And by the way, from a data perspective too, and to talk about his disruption, imagine that you want to go find something and you want a specific search. The idea of blockchain makes it easier with that data you control for you to see what you want to see. You actually have more control over what you're willing to let people know about you, so you can see more about what you're interested in. And so the disruption here is huge. It's another layer to the internet that allows for just, there's tons of industries that are going to be disrupted in the space.
All right, so I'm being told it's time for Q&A. So, all right, right up front. I'm going to repeat your question afterwards for the.
So, this question's for Joe.
Okay, so the question is for Joe, and he did a securities tokens offering. So how do you deal with transparency? Is it really transparent with the counterparty? How do you know who they are? What do you do with KYC, AML in that instance?
So again, it's no different than a typical security. You're required, again, differing from ICOs where they weren't really requirements, they weren't registered with the regulators. In our case, we did a Reg D 506C, standard private placement offering. We're required to do AML KYC. We have to know the customer, we have to make sure we know where the funds come from. We also have to do what's called an enhanced accreditation. So in some offerings, you could just say, yep, I'm an accredited investor, you sign off, and it's called self-accreditation. you're precluded from doing that in a Reg D 506C, which is what we did. So we actually had to get a third party, which requires an attorney to sign off on the enhanced accreditation. So we've gone a step beyond even KYC AML, enhanced accreditation, and then obviously all getting copies of the passports, and you have to take a selfie with the passport. We do facial recognition scanning, FACTA checks, I mean, all of the traditional scans as well.
So the question is, there's a manual requirement with a Reg D 506C private placement.
Absolutely, and that's what made this much more difficult than a standard ICO. I mean, an ICO, we could have put out there and people would have sent money in willy-nilly. We would have raised $300 million in no time. Yeah.
So do you envision a way?
Do you envision today a way to do securities tokens offering on the blockchain, which I think, Joe, is your bread and butter?
Yeah, that's precisely what we're doing. In fact, with our offering, we will trade it on our own alternative trading system. You know, it's a kind of an exchange, can't display quotes. You can think of it as a token exchange where we will allow for secondary trading. So you'll do the issuance, and in many cases, for example, a Reg D, there's a 1-year hold period. So if you did it today, in 1 year from now, you could come to us and we will allow the secondary trading on our system. Again, coming from the Wall Street community, we've integrated a lot of the existing protocols such as FIX, and we're also integrated to many of the front-end systems. So we're unique in that as this becomes a real offering and the security tokens being traded, you could get to them from your Bloomberg terminal, for example.
All right, Bobby, we've got a question. So the question is for Chris, and it's about what are you building? Is it a software? How does this token work? Just describe a little bit about the process for the consumer.
So the consumers are going to be able to enter our platform through bigtoken.com and sign up and put all your data into the system. And the more data that you put into the platform, the more rewards that you'll get. You'll be able to connect your Facebook account, your Twitter account, your LinkedIn account, your Insta. And the more of this stuff that you do, the more points that you'll get. And then if you invite your family and friends to join, then you'll earn rewards off of what they bring in, and you'll forever, kind of like a multi-level marketing program, live on top of that person and be able to earn money off of everybody that you bring into the platform. So you can end up earning a lot of money off of lots of different data if you're upfront and inviting a lot of people into the ecosystem. And so we have all the pipes that are ready for these rewards to be given out to the consumers, but that's infrastructure. Then there's also, you know, we can't build every app on top of this ecosystem, so we're relying a lot of third-party people we're making the source code open source so that everybody can build other apps on top of this. So somebody could take their CRM and put it on top of our platform and then ask their consumers more questions about who they are, what they do, why they do them, get psychographic information about them that they want answered. Instead of paying Experian or Axiom $1 million to append data, they're gonna ask the consumers directly, and then they'll reward those consumers with a reward as well for doing that, which they would ultimately, you know, buy from us to give to their consumer to find out more information. So the ecosystem then gets created.
So quick follow-up, how are the folks who make their bread and butter Experians reacting to this?
So we met with one of them, obviously it's, you know, and we showed them, you know, what we're doing, and they said, well, when it, you know, we'd rather just pay $1 billion to buy it than fund it up front. So he said, okay, I'll talk you to $1 billion.
All right, gentleman right there. Okay,
Yes.
so
Any kind of information, so that's why it's an open source ecosystem, so anybody can build something on top of it.
So the question is, what about health records? So some information obviously is going to have a regulatory overlay. So health records, if it's you and you own it, obviously, you don't have HIPAA or
Right.
data or privacy issues. But if you're now having that being used by others, there are going to be some regulatory parts to it. So health records is a very
Yeah, it's a
major
touchy one.
area. MIT is doing a lot of research into what we can be doing with transporting health records using blockchain. But continually you'll hear that the data privacy laws worldwide, not just in the United States, are becoming an impediment to it. So I would expect to see a shift in laws in that area.
And that's one of the reasons that we're selling our pharmaceutical vertical, is because all of the, the rules around pharma and consumer data is, it's very complex. And so there's so many other areas to be tackled. And
Yeah.
so.
And I'm going to ask not to do follow-ups because we have a lot of questions, so please hold your follow-ups for afterwards. People will be around. Gentleman in the front, you had a question here? This is a very good question because the gentleman is mentioning in health, there are a lot of tokens out there focusing on the health industry. I say every industry, we have multiple tokens, multiple companies out there, right? So there are probably 50 gaming companies, 7 water supply companies. Everyone out there is trying to think of an idea. So I'll actually, I'm getting,
1998, that's where
Yeah.
we are.
bring your microphone a little closer.
1998.
Yeah.
It's pets.com. It's 1,000 people that are going to drive. I mean, you go to DoorDash, that was around 20 years ago. There's going to be thousands of companies that do it. Someone's going to get it right, and the other people are going to get it wrong.
And the fundamentals of when you look at which companies you invest in are exactly what they always are, right? Look at your management team. Who's there? Look at the disclosure. So if they're not disclosing the bios of your management team, if they're not disclosing where they are located, if they're not disclosing anything about the compliance, that'll tell you, well, maybe I should be questioning investing in them. I think, sure. All right, so first of all, objection, compound question. A lawyer has to object to a lawyer's question. But Richard asked a really good question, which is really about sort of the pseudonymous element of all of this, which is how do you know, where is the money, the fiat, US dollar? How does that interact in all of this?
So it's a very good question. And one of the complex issues is you could move digital tokens around the chain all day long. A blockchain, just so we're clear, cannot move cash. You can have cash equivalents and things like that, but it has to always be tokenized. And that's one of the issues right now with the regulators is custody and control. So you have to have the assets, the fiat currency and or the securities somewhere where there's good custody and control, such as a clearing firm and or a trust bank. And a transfer agent can potentially act to transfer and move the cash and the securities, or a clearing firm, traditional clearing firm, using the blockchain. And I think the second part of your question, in terms of transparency, how do we know? Well, you're still going to be with a broker-dealer. You're still going to have to go through KYC AML, so we'll know who you are, we'll know your wallet address, and you'll still have all the same protocols that are in place today.
And I think that's one of the myths about blockchain is that it's anonymous. It's not. Anonymous means we have no idea. It's pseudonymous.
I would like to say to Richard, when I talked about DTC being dead man walking, the concept is that they charge broker-dealers clearing charges to see that the securities match up, but in the blockchain, you don't have that argument, right? So the idea you go to tZero is you get to say, hey, I already know who the seller and the buyer is. Don't let the broker-dealers put up millions of dollars of capital and basically put them out of business with illiquid charges. It's a scam.
And also, you actually know who your shareholder is. If you issue on the blockchain this way, as opposed to DTCC, everything's held in street name. So the issuer of a company has no idea who owns their stock. Where in this particular case, it's fully transparent. You know who your shareholders are.
I hope
All
you're
right,
not with
we
DTC,
have,
by the way.
we have time
You guys are laughing
for
over
one
it.
more question. The gentleman right back there has been waiting for a while. Okay, so the question is relating to mining, and it's really a great question to end on, not just for mining, but where is mining going, and really what's the next stage, and how do people catch up?
The holy grail would get to the 7 nanometer. We're mining at 16 nanometer chips, which a lot of people are. There's talk of machines that are going to be 10. Maybe you guys know some that are out there that I'm. Yeah, I'm completely aware of that foundry. I know what they're doing there. Believe me, we want to make our own miners, so I don't have anything to announce there, but we're aware of what Samsung's doing in 10 nanometer. But effectively, when you're mining, if a lot of miners are on one currency, the difficulty goes up, faster, right? If miners come offline, the difficulty comes down a little bit because and the rate of difficulty change. Like with Bitcoin, the difficulty change, say every 10 days versus a few hours for Bitcoin Cash because it's a newer network, right? So, but people are still using F7s. So it's all to us. The whole concept is going to be what's the cost of that power, right? You're still going to be able to use those old miners, but at what cost? We use it to get long Bitcoin. It's profitable to mine Bitcoin, but if you believe in Tim Draper and some of the other people that's going to be stored value, which is my thesis, and I direct the capital allocation for DPW, I just want to get long. I want to get long at all cost, right? Because I think it's going to be stored value. I agree with the Winklevi. I think it's a home run, and it's going to be digital storage, and there's going to be a form of digital storage. But then I have another thesis that Elon Musk is right, and it's a simulation. So
Yeah,
there you go.
yeah.
So,
Tim or Elon?
If you go to the simulation part of it, then everything's becoming digital.
So we're gonna just end up with one last question. I think we already have it for Todd, sort of, where do you see things going? But trends, what are what do you see as the big trends for blockchain in 2018? And I'll start with my big trend, which is M&A, mergers and acquisition, because we're seeing 6, 7, 8 companies in the same industry, and some raising money. You are going to be seeing them consolidating with each other. There are too many players out there in the same space. So that I would say M&A, second half of the year. We're already starting to see it. We'll start to see more consolidation.
I think people will become much more accustomed to what crypto is. People stop thinking that it's just for drug dealers, and that view the fact that it's something that has some real value. And so I think this year will be kind of the year that securitized tokens come to market, and that people will get more comfortable. So you'll get a lot of the traditional hedge funds and the traditional investors that are going to be willing to invest in a securitized token instrument of some sort. So I think that'll be a big thing for this year, and then there'll be places that you can actually trade them.
Yeah. So it's interesting you say on traditional investors. Morgan Creek Capital predicts that, or did a survey, and they believe that only 7% of the investing public is out there right now in Bitcoin in any form of thing. So 93% has not yet entered. You're seeing incredible volatility in currency, cryptocurrency, but also in altcoins. So I do think as you start to see more traditional financing come in, I would say probably you're going to start to see a stabilization of these markets as well. Okay, Joe, you get to end with what is your big prediction for trend?
I think it's a whole new vehicle for capital formation in the U.S. and outside the U.S. You now have, again, small companies that could raise money. Very good entrepreneurs can raise money in a much more efficient fashion. And I agree with Chris. It's also, we're seeing now that their securities are becoming regulated, institutions could come in and play. So you're going to see a much bigger influx of institutional money coming into security tokens.
And what he's saying about custodianship, by the way, as soon as you see an ETF approved for Bitcoin, where custodianship is solved and the SEC is comfortable, institutional money is going to flow in a big way.
All right. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for sharing a little blockchain karma, which is what we call it, which is, kind of, someone brought us in. We're hoping to bring some other people in. Thank you, everybody.